The sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the sterile hallway, each step a reminder of the life I was about to lose. My name is Victoria Monroe, and today, at precisely 10:15 a.m., I became just another casualty in the corporate battlefield. The summons came during what should have been a routine Monday morning. An email from Human Resources requesting my presence in Conference Room B. The subject line read urgent meeting, but it might as well have said your career's execution. I remember standing there in that cold, windowless room, staring at the three executives who had orchestrated this ambush. Their faces were carefully composed masks of professional detachment, but I could see it in their eyes. The relief of finally being able to push me out. Margaret Chin, the chief operating officer, sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured hands folded over a thick manila envelope that would later become my lifeline. To her right, Daniel Park, the general counsel, couldn't quite meet my gaze, while Sarah Bennett, the HR director, maintained her practiced, sympathetic expression. "Victoria," Margaret began, her voice carrying that peculiar blend of false warmth and calculated efficiency that only corporate professionals can master. "We've appreciated your contributions to Newbridge Technologies over the past 7 years." 7 years, 2 months, and 12 days I wanted to correct her, but I knew better than to interrupt. "However, after careful consideration, we've decided to make some organizational changes that will affect your position." The words hit me like a freight train, though I somehow managed to maintain my composure. They spoke of restructuring and new directions, but the truth lay in the subtext. They were terminating me without cause, effective immediately. As they slid the termination package across the table, I noticed something peculiar. Beneath the standard severance agreement, there was a document marked confidential, legal review only. It wasn't until I found myself sitting in my car in the parking garage, clutching the envelope like a lifeline, that reality truly sank in. The crisp autumn air did nothing to cool the fire burning in my chest. I had poured my soul into Newbridge Technologies, working late nights, weekends, and holidays, often skipping family events to meet deadlines. I had built entire departments from scratch, mentored dozens of employees, and helped increase the company's market share by 42% last year alone. And now, they were discarding me like yesterday's news. The drive home felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold through a foggy windshield. When I finally arrived at my small suburban home, I didn't even bother changing out of my power suit. Instead, I spread the contents of the envelope across my dining table. That's when I noticed something odd. Several documents bore dates from months before today's meeting. Termination papers prepared in advance, strategic planning memboards with my name crossed out, financial projections that seemed to account for my departure. My heart pounded as I examined these pieces more closely. There was a pattern here, a narrative hidden between the lines of corporate jargon. It was then that I remembered a conversation from 6 months ago, the board meeting where I had refused to authorize a questionable acquisition. The same acquisition that would have lined certain executives' pockets with substantial bonuses. At the time, I thought my stance demonstrated integrity. Now it seemed it had sealed my fate. As night fell, I realized I couldn't process this alone. My phone contacts scrolled past friends and family until I landed on one name, Marcus Thompson. We hadn't spoken in years, not since law school, but he had built a reputation as one of the sharpest corporate attorneys in the city. When he answered on the third ring, his voice carried the same confident edge I remembered from our moot court competitions. "Marcus, I need your help," I began, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to remain composed. "They fired me, but I think they've made a huge mistake." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Vic, is that you? What happened?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. "It's complicated. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I need someone who understands both the legal and business aspects of this mess." Marcus agreed, and we arranged to meet at his downtown office at 8 a.m. As I hung up, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. The thought of food turned my stomach, but I forced myself to prepare a simple sandwich. Each bite tasted like ash in my mouth. Sleep proved impossible, so I spent the night poring over every document, every email, every memo I could access from my personal cloud storage. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but clarity had begun to emerge. These weren't just termination papers, They were the beginning of a paper trail that could unravel everything Newbridge Technologies claimed to stand for. As I dressed for my meeting with Marcus, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different. Older, harder, but also more determined than I had ever seen myself. The ride to Marcus's office passed in a blur of orange streetlights and early morning commuters. His building stood tall among the financial district skyline, its glass facade reflecting the rising sun. As I stepped into the lobby, I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement coursing through my veins. This wasn't just about getting justice anymore. This was about exposing the truth behind the polished corporate facade. Marcus greeted me at his office door, his sharp eyes immediately noting the dark circles under mine. "You look like hell, Vic," he said, ushering me inside. "But knowing you, I'm guessing you've already uncovered something significant." I handed him the stack of documents, watching as his expression shifted from concern to intense focus. "Start from the beginning," he instructed, settling into his leather chair. "Leave nothing out." For the next 3 hours, I recounted every detail, from the suspicious timing of the termination to the predated documents, from the questionable acquisition to the subtle power plays that had marked my final months at Newbridge. Marcus listened intently, occasionally pausing to take notes or request clarification. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This isn't just a wrongful termination case," he said finally. "This is corporate sabotage, potential securities fraud, and possibly even conspiracy. Those documents you brought, particularly the ones marked confidential, suggest they've been preparing for this for months. But why you specifically? You were one of their top performers." I hesitated, remembering the board meeting that had set everything in motion. 6 months ago, I blocked a major acquisition that would have netted the executive team millions in bonuses. The target company had serious compliance issues, and I refused to sign off on it. They tried to pressure me, but I held firm. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "That's motive, but we need more than circumstantial evidence. Have you accessed your work email recently?" I shook my head. They cut off my access immediately after the meeting. "Good thing you mentioned cloud storage earlier," he said, reaching for his laptop. "Let's start digging. If they've been planning this for months, there's bound to be a digital trail. Corporate execs always get sloppy when they think they're untouchable." As Marcus worked, I paced his office, memories flooding back in waves. The late nights spent mentoring young analysts, the satisfaction of seeing projects succeed, the pride of building teams that outperformed expectations, all of it now tainted by the realization that my loyalty had been weaponized against me. The injustice burned hotter with each passing minute. "Got something," Marcus announced suddenly. On his screen, a series of encrypted files began to materialize. "Looks like someone forgot to completely purge your shared drives. These appear to be internal audit reports, and they're damning. Multiple violations of SEC regulations, improper accounting practices, and—" He paused, his face going pale. "A shell corporation structure that funnels money offshore." My knees nearly buckled. That's how they were planning to finance the acquisition I blocked. "Bingo," Marcus confirmed. "And look at this. Emails discussing contingency plans in case VM raised objections." "VM, that's you, Victoria. They've been targeting you specifically for months." The magnitude of their betrayal hit me like a physical force. Not only had they planned my downfall, but they had done so while engaging in activities that could potentially destroy countless lives if exposed. Investors, employees, partners, all would be affected if Newbridge Technologies collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. "We need to move carefully," Marcus cautioned. "If we play this right, we can turn their own trap against them. But we'll need more than just documentation. We need witnesses, insider information, and preferably someone willing to testify about the culture of corruption within Newbridge." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The text message read simply, "They're coming for others too. Meet me at Joe's Diner tonight at 8 p.m. Alone." The sender's identity remained hidden, but the message carried an unmistakable urgency. "Marcus," I said, showing him the text. "This could be our first real lead. Whoever this is, they're scared enough to reach out, but cautious enough to stay anonymous. We need to find out what they know." He nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we proceed with extreme caution. If Newbridge catches wind that we're onto something bigger, They'll bury us faster than you can say whistleblower protection. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of strategy sessions and document analysis. By the time evening approached, I found myself sitting in a booth at Joe's Diner, my nerves stretched taut like piano wires. The diner's neon sign cast eerie shadows across the cracked vinyl seats, and each approaching figure sent my heart racing. When the informant finally arrived, I barely recognized them beneath the baseball cap and oversized hoodie. But as they slid into the seat across from me, their identity became devastatingly clear. It was Rachel Kim, Newbridge's former chief compliance officer, the very person who should have stopped this corruption before it started. "They made me leave 4 months ago," Rachel whispered, her hands trembling around her coffee cup, "when I started asking too many questions about those offshore accounts. They offered me a generous severance package to keep quiet, but I couldn't live with myself anymore. Then I heard about what they did to you." As she spoke, her story unfolded like a dark mirror of my own experience. Only worse. Much worse. The true scope of Newbridge's operations began to crystallize, a web of deceit that extended far beyond anything I had initially suspected. And at its center lay a $15 million legal nightmare waiting to be unleashed. Rachel's revelations painted a picture far darker than I had imagined. She spoke of secret meetings held in private clubs, coded communications that bypassed official channels, and an intricate network of shell companies that spanned multiple continents. "It's not just about skimming profits or dodging taxes," she explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're laundering money for some very dangerous people. That's why they're so desperate to silence anyone who gets too close." Her words sent chills down my spine. The implications were staggering. International organized crime, compromised officials, and a corporate entity serving as a front for illegal activities. Suddenly, my termination seemed less like a personal vendetta and more like damage control for a much larger operation. As Rachel continued, she revealed the existence of Project Phoenix, a code name for Newbridge's most ambitious and illegal venture yet. The project involved developing advanced AI technology capable of manipulating financial markets on a global scale. The prototype had already shown remarkable success in controlled environments, generating returns that defied conventional investment strategies. However, the system required constant refinement and testing, which meant deploying it in real-world scenarios without proper regulatory approval. "The board members you clashed with?" Rachel said, her eyes darting nervously around the diner. "They're just middle management compared to who's really running things. There's a shadow board operating completely off the books. Your refusal to approve that acquisition threatened to expose their entire operation. That's why they targeted you specifically." The waitress refilled our coffee cups, oblivious to the explosive information being exchanged at our table. I glanced at my watch, 9:47 p.m. Marcus would be expecting an update soon, but I needed to gather as much intelligence as possible. "How high does this go?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "All the way to the top," Rachel replied, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. "This contains everything. Transaction records, meeting minutes, even audio recordings of some of their planning sessions. But you need to understand something crucial. They're watching everyone connected to Newbridge. If they suspect I've talked to you, we're both dead." The gravity of her statement hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about corporate malfeasance anymore. It was a matter of survival. Yet, alongside the fear coursed a growing determination. These people had stolen my career, my dignity, and now they were threatening innocent lives through their criminal enterprise. They had picked the wrong person to cross. "I need to show this to Marcus immediately," I said, accepting the USB drive. "But first, tell me about the others. Who else knows about Project Phoenix?" Rachel's expression darkened. "That's the most disturbing part. They've been recruiting internally, identifying promising employees, and gradually drawing them into their circle. Some join willingly, seduced by the promise of wealth and power. Others are coerced through blackmail or threats. It's like a cancer spreading through the company." A sudden commotion near the diner's entrance caught our attention. A group of men in dark suits had entered, scanning the room with military precision. Rachel's face went white. "They're here," she breathed. "You need to leave. Now." Before I could respond, she grabbed my hand, pressing a folded piece of paper into my palm. Emergency contacts and safe houses. Memorize them, then destroy the paper. If anything happens to me, contact Agent Carter at the FBI. He's clean. I verified it personally. The men were moving closer, their eyes scanning each booth methodically. Without another word, Rachel slipped out of the booth and walked toward the kitchen, her movements deliberately casual. I watched as she disappeared through the swinging doors, leaving me alone with the USB drive and the knowledge that my life would never be the same. Paying my bill with trembling hands, I exited through the rear door, merging with the evening crowd on the street. The city lights blurred through unshed tears as I hurried toward my car, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping a machine that could devastate economies and destroy lives worldwide. Back at Marcus's office, I found him pacing furiously, his phone pressed to his ear. "She's here," he announced to whoever was on the other end. "We need to move fast. They've already started closing in." Hanging up, he turned to me, his expression grave. "We've got maybe 48 hours before they escalate their efforts. Whatever you've got, we need to act on it now." Sliding the USB drive across his desk, I began recounting everything Rachel had told me, my voice steadying as I spoke. With each revelation, Marcus's expression grew darker, his pen moving rapidly across legal pads as he mapped out our strategy. The night stretched into morning as we worked, transforming from victims into warriors preparing for battle against one of the most sophisticated corporate conspiracies in modern history. Our initial plan focused on creating multiple layers of protection. First, we established secure communication channels using encrypted messaging apps and burner phones. Marcus reached out to trusted colleagues in various legal fields, assembling a team of experts who could handle different aspects of the case without connecting the dots back to us. Meanwhile, I began organizing the data from the USB drive, categorizing evidence, and identifying key players in the conspiracy. The most challenging aspect proved to be managing the psychological toll. Every time my phone rang or someone knocked on my door, adrenaline surged through my body. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by endless hours of analyzing documents and strategizing our next moves. Marcus insisted on regular check-ins with a trauma counselor, recognizing that our mental health was as crucial as our legal preparation. To protect ourselves legally, we implemented what Marcus called the onion strategy. Layer upon layer of protective measures, establishing offshore trusts to safeguard any recovered assets, creating dummy corporations to manage sensitive information, and securing multiple backup locations for our evidence. We knew that once we made our first move, Newbridge would retaliate with everything they had. The emotional impact manifested in unexpected ways. Simple tasks like grocery shopping or attending social events became nerve-wracking experiences. Friends noticed a change in me, the constant looking over my shoulder, the jumpiness at sudden noises. I had to distance myself from loved ones, knowing that association with me could put them in danger. The loneliness was crushing but necessary. Our investigation revealed that Newbridge's tentacles reached far beyond what we'd initially suspected. Through careful analysis of the USB drive's contents, we discovered connections to political figures, media outlets, and even law enforcement agencies. This wasn't just a corporate conspiracy. It was a systemic infection of power structures at the highest levels. Each new revelation added complexity to our case, while simultaneously strengthening our resolve. Marcus introduced me to Agent Carter, the FBI contact Rachel had mentioned, a grizzled veteran with eyes that missed nothing. Carter listened patiently as we presented our findings. His reaction surprised me. Instead of skepticism, he showed immediate understanding and concern. "We've been trying to crack this organization for years," he admitted. "Your information fills in critical gaps we've been missing." Working with federal agents added another layer of tension to our operation. While their resources and protection were invaluable, they operated on government timelines that often conflicted with our sense of urgency. We had to learn to balance our independent investigation with the bureaucratic requirements of a federal probe. The data analysis phase proved particularly challenging. The volume of information was overwhelming, requiring us to develop sophisticated algorithms to identify patterns and connections. Late nights turned into early mornings as we traced money trails through complex networks of shell companies and offshore accounts. Each discovery brought us closer to understanding the full scope of Newbridge's operations while simultaneously increasing the danger we faced. Perhaps the most difficult decision involved determining when and how to approach potential witnesses. Many former employees lived in fear of retaliation, having signed non-disclosure agreements that could ruin them financially if broken. We had to carefully weigh the risks and benefits of contacting each individual, often finding creative ways to gather information without directly implicating them. As weeks turned into months, our operation evolved into a delicate dance of gathering evidence, protecting sources, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The emotional toll mounted, the stress of living under constant threat, the guilt of endangering others, and the frustration of watching Newbridge continue its operations while we built our case. Yet, through it all, a steely determination took root within me. These people had taken everything from me, but in doing so, they had awakened a fighter I never knew existed. The turning point came unexpectedly during a routine data analysis session. Marcus and I had been reviewing financial transactions when we noticed a pattern of payments to a particular consulting firm. At first glance, they appeared legitimate, typical corporate expenses buried among thousands of other transactions. But something about the timing and amounts triggered a warning bell in my mind. "Wait," I said, freezing the screen. "These payments correspond exactly with the dates of major market fluctuations." My finger traced the timeline on the monitor. "Remember the AI system Rachel mentioned? Project Phoenix." Marcus leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Run a cross-reference with the personnel records from that period." As the database processed our query, I felt that familiar tingling sensation at the base of my skull, the one that signaled we were on to something significant. When the results populated, both of us stared in stunned silence. The consulting firm wasn't external at all. It was a front for Newbridge's own research division. More importantly, the payments aligned perfectly with periods when key employees had been temporarily reassigned to special projects. "This is it," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed excitement. "The smoking gun. They've been testing their system in real time, using legitimate corporate transactions to mask their activities. No wonder they've been so successful. They're not just predicting market movements. They're causing them." Our discovery sent shockwaves through our investigation. Suddenly, pieces that had seemed unrelated began falling into place. The mysterious absences of certain employees, the unusual surge in IT infrastructure spending, the carefully timed resignations of compliance officers, all pointed to a coordinated effort to develop and deploy Project Phoenix under the radar. Agent Carter arrived within the hour, his usual calm demeanor replaced by barely contained urgency. As we explained our findings, his face hardened into a mask of determination. "This changes everything," he said, pulling out his phone. "We need to escalate this immediately. If they've been manipulating markets at this level, we're talking about potentially billions in damages. Whole economies could be at risk." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Our makeshift command center transformed into a hive of investigators, analysts, and federal agents. Whiteboards filled with connection maps, computer screens displayed complex financial models, and conference calls connected us with experts from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Each new piece of evidence added weight to our case, but also increased the stakes exponentially. One breakthrough led to another. Former employees began coming forward, emboldened by our progress and the protection offered by federal authorities. Their testimonies painted a chilling picture of systematic corruption that permeated every level of Newbridge's operations. Middle managers described pressure to falsify reports. Junior analysts recounted being recruited into the shadow organization. And IT staff detailed the elaborate security measures surrounding Project Phoenix's development servers. Yet with each victory came new dangers. My apartment was broken into twice, though nothing appeared to be stolen. Anonymous threats arrived via email and postal mail, each more menacing than the last. During one particularly harrowing incident, a black SUV followed me through rush hour traffic, maintaining perfect distance until I managed to lose it in a maze of one-way streets. Marcus insisted I move to a safe house, but I refused. I needed to stay accessible to our growing network of informants. The emotional strain intensified. Nights became sleepless vigils, punctuated by paranoia-induced adrenaline spikes. I found myself jumping at shadows, scrutinizing every interaction for signs of surveillance. Meals became erratic, sometimes skipped entirely in favor of another hour of analysis or another witness interview. Marcus monitored my condition closely, forcing breaks and counseling sessions that I often resented but desperately needed. Our investigation revealed that Project Phoenix had evolved beyond market manipulation. The AI system had learned to identify vulnerabilities in corporate security protocols, exploit weaknesses in supply chains, and even influence public opinion through sophisticated social media campaigns. What had started as a tool for financial gain had transformed into a comprehensive instrument of corporate warfare. The deeper we dug, the more we understood why Newbridge had been so determined to silence me. My role in blocking the acquisition hadn't just disrupted their bonus plans. It had threatened to expose their entire operation. The acquisition target, we discovered, possessed proprietary technology that would have enhanced Project Phoenix's capabilities tenfold. My refusal to approve the deal had forced them to slow their expansion plans and divert resources to cover their tracks. As our case grew stronger, so did our enemies' desperation. Subtle attempts at intimidation escalated into direct threats. One afternoon, returning to Marcus's office, we found the windows shattered and files scattered across the floor. Security footage showed nothing useful, just static during the crucial minutes of the break-in. The message was clear. They knew we were closing in. Despite the mounting pressure, a core group of allies emerged. Former Newbridge employees formed an underground network, sharing information and providing mutual support. Tech specialists volunteered their expertise to help us analyze data and secure our communications. Even some current employees, risking everything, began feeding us real-time intelligence from within the company. Through it all, I found strength in the growing movement we had inadvertently sparked. People who had suffered similar betrayals at the hands of corporate greed rallied to our cause. Victims of Newbridge's manipulations, both individuals and businesses, joined forces, creating a powerful coalition determined to bring the company to justice. Our investigation had transformed from a personal quest for vindication into something far greater. We weren't just fighting for compensation or recognition anymore. We were defending the very foundation of fair business practices. The $15 million legal nightmare we were about to unleash wouldn't just impact Newbridge Technologies. It would send shockwaves through the entire corporate world, potentially reshaping how businesses operated and how regulators monitored them. As the final pieces of our case came together, I realized that my termination had been the catalyst for something extraordinary. What had begun as a personal tragedy had evolved into a crusade for accountability and justice. The road ahead promised to be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose that transcended my own grievances. We were ready to strike back, armed with truth and fortified by the support of those who believed in our cause.